Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So in today's video I want to talk about the pros and cons of living an alternative lifestyle as an artist, especially living in more uncertain times. As a lot of you probably already know, about 2.5 years ago we decided to move into this van full-time, and I've been living and working out of this van for that entire time. And I wanted to talk about more generally the pros and cons of this lifestyle as honestly as I can. I'm going to be talking about the good, the bad and the ugly, and then more specifically from an artist point of view I want to talk about how van life has affected how I run my business and the pros and cons of choosing an alternative lifestyle in uncertain economic times and how that has benefited me. And I know that living in a van isn't necessarily something that appeals to a lot of people. It probably only appeals to like a very specific kind of person, so it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But my hope with this video, firstly, you enjoy hearing about my experience, and maybe you can find some parts of my experience and relate it to your own life without having to do something as drastic as living in a tin can. So firstly, one of the main positives that I've noticed living in a van, myself and my husband, is that we are in a much better financial position. As we both work quite low income jobs now, we've noticed that living in a van means that we don't have that financial strain that we would do if we were living in a house and we had to pay rent or a mortgage and bills, and we're also keeping a car on the road to get to work and commuting and all of this stuff. We have the ability to save as well. During the summer when my husband's working, we mostly put away that money for the winter time, which we then go away and travel on. We are able to live very, very cheaply, and that is a huge benefit just in terms of like stress levels of life, doing what we want, and for me running my art business in more uncertain times. One of the main positives to this lifestyle and why we are so hesitant to stop living this way is because of all of the possibilities and the sense of freedom that you have. We are changing up our situation, I guess, on a daily basis because we're camping in different places and traveling around, but also on like a seasonal basis, working through the spring and summer and then moving around in the winter and traveling internationally. So it always feels like there's different possibilities on the horizon and new experiences to be had. And if we don't like something that we're doing, we have the freedom to change it up very quickly. If we were tied into a house with contracts, anything that goes along with living in bricks and mortar, we wouldn't be able to change up our lifestyle as easily as being able to just move our little home on wheels on to the next thing. Another huge positive and why I love this lifestyle so much is because of all the amazing memories that we already have. Travelling internationally has been amazing. Living on Scottish islands, not one but 2 Scottish islands, which I never thought we'd be able to do.
Dark ocean with a tiny flame. Somehow I'm gonna find.
The winter sun has been a real positive for me as someone who lives in the UK. When winter comes, I do notice a real dip in my mood, the lack of light. You might be able to tell in this van, like the light isn't very good today. We go away for the winter and we go chase the sun. We go to southern Spain. I'm no longer struggling with my mental health in the winter like I was in a house. Another positive is the resilience that I feel like I've built, adapting to difficult situations. A lot of problems with van life are very immediate, can be quite stressful, but I just feel like I've built up my resilience, learning how to manage more difficult situations sometimes. Sorry if you can hear my pug, he's snoring so loudly beside me, I might move him. I know, you're trying to get your morning sleep. There he is. You're snoring very loudly. Should we put you in the front? Good boy, that's you. So I feel very privileged that I've been able to learn a lot about the world. My geography and my history was not very good, and I feel like I've learned a lot more being able to learn about the history of the countries we're in and the culture. Everyone says that about traveling, but I've just really really relished in it these past few years. More on the resilience thing, being able to adapt to living with much less has been great and has really boosted my self-confidence. I always was attracted to minimalism and living a simpler life and tiny homes and that whole movement, but I didn't really know if I could do it. So now I know after 2.5 years for sure that I can. I live with very little storage. I have a very small wardrobe and like one cupboard for clothes, one cupboard for my art business. It means that I appreciate what I do have so much more. I appreciate the little things so much more. Like I mentioned, with having much smaller overheads and expenses in our daily life, it does mean that we can work less. So my husband at the moment doesn't work full time, he works seasonally, so in the winter he doesn't work and he mostly just helps me out with my art business. And then I think I also work much less than I was in the house. I don't feel so much pressure to be working myself so hard, and also it's really difficult to work insanely long hours out of a tin can, so it kind of forces you to not work so much just for self-preservation. I don't feel burnt out at all anymore, and I struggled with that a lot. So let's talk about the bad things, because there definitely are quite a lot, and you basically just have to weigh up whether you're able to deal with them or not. Different people would consider different things to be a negative. I've seen that other van lifers have talked about how kind of like gross some of the daily tasks are, like emptying your toilet and that kind of thing, but I wouldn't even class that as something bad. It's just one of the chores. But I would say that chores in general is a real negative about van life. Just the amount of time it takes to do things, and you always have a list of things to keep on top of. Even things like just doing the washing up and putting the van away in the morning. Once Craig's gone off to work, I then have to clean up the van, and it definitely takes about an hour in the morning. I think also living in such a small space means that you're constantly moving things around to get to other things, which makes things take longer. Something very specific to me as someone who's really introverted is the lack of privacy as a real negative, because right outside of the van doors is the outside world. There are some days, well for me there's a lot of days where I really don't want to see anyone and I don't want to be perceived, but you kind of have to be perceived because you need to do things outside of the van. Especially during the spring and summer with Craig working, we are in tourist areas usually. I don't like it as an introvert. I like to be away from the world. There's also something that I call tiny space stress, which will overcome you at certain points living in such a small space. If you're trying to do everything really quickly, if you're in a rush, if you've maybe had a bit of a stressful day, it can become very easily overwhelming. The solution to that is just to slow down and breathe and try not to do too much. Seeing that we have spent quite a lot of time in our van in Scotland, we have dealt with a lot of weather conditions and they haven't been great, especially this summer just gone. It was really wet. Just trying to dry things in a small space is really difficult. Yeah, it's just a nightmare when it's bad weather. I would also say like really strong winds are a little bit scary sometimes. We've been in the van through a few storms and the way the wind rocks the van is a little bit scary, even though you know the van's not going to be knocked over or knocked off over a cliff or anything. It is a bit scary and it will keep you awake. I would say that my workspace is a bit of a challenge sometimes. It's quite cramped. There's no other way of having it. It just is cramped. Having animals in a van is quite tricky sometimes, although it's obviously mostly a positive thing. They're members of our family. We love traveling with them. It's such a privilege to be able to do that. To have all these memories with them in their golden years, it's just lovely. But there are challenges too. Having space for them, all of the paraphernalia that comes with having dogs takes up a lot of space in an already small space. Things like mud and fur, farts, really stinky farts, like you can't escape them. Midge's bed is below ours, so if he farts, that smell's coming up to us. The responsibility that comes with the dogs, you can't leave them in a hot van. You've got to be making sure you're getting them out a lot, so they get some time out of the van, and in difficult weather conditions that's not fun. They are a big responsibility basically. Something I've noticed is with my health, I can't stretch in the van, I can't do yoga, and because I don't really like being perceived, I don't really like exercising outside. I don't like exercising in a really obvious way, like doing a yoga routine. So yeah, my body is stiff. It's not benefiting from lack of stretching. And also there are some complications with not having a fixed address when you want to do certain things and access certain services. When we need to order things online or have things sent to us, it's a bit more complicated than having a home address, obviously. We get everything sent or redirected to Craig's place of work at the time. Things like healthcare, like needing to see the doctor or the dentist, is a little bit tricky, especially if you want to do that on the NHS. I think that the NHS do have to see you even if you don't have a fixed address that you can give them. I would say not having a fixed address, not having a home address does create complications, but it is all manageable stuff, really. And then the ugly, like the worst things about van life, in my opinion. Number one would be, I guess, near-death experiences. I've not really talked about this on my channel very much. I think I talked about it on Patreon. I was filming a Patreon video, but yeah. Earlier this year when we were traveling to the Balkans, through Italy, making our way to Bosnia, that felt scary at times. Like, there's scary drivers on the road, bad drivers, and at one point someone's tyre blew out. I think it was on a big lorry, and yeah, it just flew into the road, and that could have caused a big crash. Luckily it didn't. And yeah, there's just a possibility for anything to go wrong, and when you are living out of a vehicle, you're on the road more, so the more time you spend driving on the roads, the more likely it is that you're going to be involved in accidents and stuff, I would guess. So yeah, I definitely feel that it's a bit more dangerous living this way. We have had a few near-death experiences. Both of them are to do with our handbrake. It's not a very good handbrake. It's been fixed as well as it can. We were doing a big drive to try and get across to Bosnia. We were on a bit of a schedule. It was the evening. We were trying to find somewhere to sleep. We found someone parked for night. It said it was up a steep hill, but we were like, we can do it. I think we were outside Monaco at the time, and it's very, very hilly and steep around there. We were going up this small, windy residential road, like really, really steep. Because it was so windy, Craig needed to change gear, and as he did that, he stalled the van, and we were on a hill like this, with a very heavy back-ended van, because the back of the van is our entire life, and it's like built out as well, so it's got heavy things going on in the back of the van, and our handbrake would not hold, so Craig was just relying purely on the brake, and if the brake had failed, if he'd slipped off the brake, we would have died, probably. It felt really, really scary. I was kind of quietly screaming, and actually, I don't think I was quietly screaming, I think I was loudly screaming. I did think that we might die. He couldn't get the van to start either, but finally he did, and we inched into this tiny little driveway that we had in order to pivot and go back down the hill, because we made a mistake going up that hill, basically. And that had happened another time as well, and it was those two times where the van has stalled on a steep hill are the only two times when I've seen fear in Craig's eyes. So we're much more cautious going up steep hills now. We know not to change a gear, just accelerate loads in second and get ourselves up there. And driving along sketchy mountain roads with a drop off the side, it feels scary sometimes. I would say another ugly side of van life is, and I'm sorry if anyone's going to be offended by this, but van life in England is bad. We hate it. We try and avoid it as much as possible. We do have family. All of our family live in England, so obviously we do go there to visit them. But yeah, van life in England is, I don't like it at all. It's really expensive. It seems like anything you want to do has got a price on it. We don't have to pay so much for parking in Scotland. I don't know what the deal with that is. And obviously it's much more accepted and welcomed that people wild camp in Scotland. They have different rules about land, different laws about access to land in Scotland, which really benefits van dwellers. And I just find like England is quite restrictive. There'll often be height barriers in places so you just can't park there for some silly reason. There'll be like perfectly quiet little car parks, and then they'll say no overnight parking, and it's like, why no overnight parking? Everywhere's like that in England. I feel like the rules are really strict and everything's expensive. There's a real lack of services to use. It's harder to find water. It's harder to find showers. Yeah, I just find it difficult and annoying, and I don't like it. And then the last ugly side of van life is our feeling of isolation, because we are houseless. We're not tied to a particular town or village. We don't have like neighbours or a local community. Sometimes it does kind of creep up on me that I just feel quite lost. It's just me and Craig against the world sometimes. That's a bit better. So I had to just go walk the dogs, and didn't I, Quincy Nexley? So there are a lot of good things about being a nomadic artist, I have discovered. The first one I would say is personal growth, because we made a leap and changed up our life quite drastically, and with that came a lot of lessons and a lot of adapting and new experiences, and I think just in general that's probably made me a better person and probably a better artist because of it. I also think just like I was saying earlier about the rich memories that we have, I'm sure that they're going to stay with me for years, and there'll be something that I incorporate into my artwork for probably years to come. I think they're already starting to peek through into my work. I just finished making a zine which is related to our travels, and that'll be out soon. Yeah, so I feel like I've been gathering inspiration these past few years and not necessarily putting it into use yet, but I think it has been stored somewhere, and I think I will probably continue to use it. Being able to run my art business in such a minimal and stripped back way has been a really great learning experience, and is probably a skill that I'll be using throughout the rest of my career. I think I've been learning some good lessons about content creation these past few years. I would say my content's changed quite a lot, and not necessarily everyone has been on board with that change, but I've really enjoyed the challenge and the learning experience, documenting our travels and making videos on the road. I would say over the past few summers, especially being on Scottish Islands, it's been a great opportunity to kind of get a taste for different creative communities and figure out what kind of ones that I would want to be a part of in the future if we ever settle again. So this past summer being on the Isle of Mull, which is a very creative place full of artists and creators, being in the town of Tobermory and having Antabar, which is the art centre in Tobermory, being able to spend a lot of time in there and going to private view exhibitions, and yeah, just feeling like immersed in different creative communities has been really beneficial for me. And obviously the last one, the most important one I would say, is the lack of financial pressure. So yeah, our overheads are tiny, and the freedom that gives you as someone creative is, I just don't think it can be overstated at all. I do still feel a lot of pressure to be constantly like creating and making and bringing things out, but my business has changed quite a lot over the past few years, and I'm not working with as many clients or doing quite as many client or publishing projects, but that's not something that is stressing me out hugely because I don't have rent, I don't have these big overheads. Going through quite a difficult economic time right now. I still think that we are like in recovery a lot from COVID, especially in the UK. We really didn't manage things very well, and then also because of Brexit, we're kind of like out on our own. We've definitely isolated ourselves. During COVID, there were some booms in certain industries, and publishing was one of them, because people were sitting at home reading more books, doing puzzles and learning, taking the time to learn things and do certain activities that they'd always wanted to do within the home, and publishing was able to provide products that would fulfill their needs. So it had a real boom, and now there is this readjustment period where things have gone back to normal. They are having to look at their budgets again, and people's ways of working have changed, the market has changed, so freelancers are obviously going to feel the effects of that. Art budgets and creative budgets are usually some of the first things to be cut or adjusted, so that directly affects us, and I think that's what's been happening over the past few years. And yeah, I've really noticed, I mean, it hasn't ground to a complete halt. I have worked on a few different things, but it's much slower, and it has been much busier for me in my business. Taking away some of that financial pressure has been really good. Some bad things about being a nomadic artist, I would say, I feel like I have less time to dedicate to my work these days. Like I said about the chores that I need to do on a daily basis, they take up so much more of my time. Needing to take care of the dogs outside of the van a lot more. I feel like I do spend more time tending to them and tending to the van. We're travelling sometimes, which is not compatible with getting on with a big chunk of work. So I do work more sporadically, smaller chunks of time. I think it means that I can't be as ambitious as I once was. Also, I have limited possibilities for what I can embark on because of limited storage, so I can't buy a load of stock for my shop. I have to think small, or think of ways to shift the stock really quickly. And then I would say there is a lot of temptation not to work, especially when we're traveling internationally. I want to be outside as much as possible, especially because Craig's not working when we travel in the winter, so I want to be with him. He's going on hikes and I'm staying behind at the van working, and it feels rubbish. So there's a lot more temptation to just get outside, and because we're in new places a lot of the time. I would say cabin fever is a big one. The few times when I have been working on really big publishing projects over the past few years, it's been really stressful at times because I've been working from a tiny space, needing to work long hours and having to move my workspace around a lot of the time for different reasons. Thank you so much for watching all the way through this video. I really hope you got something out of it. As I was filming and editing this, I was just thinking, oh god, is this really boring and unrelatable? I'm just not sure. Let me know what you thought of it. And yes, thank you for all your lovely comments on my last video. I really enjoyed reading through them all. And the last thing I wanted to say before I go is that I am involved in a charity auction right now. You can, I think there's a few hours left to bid on my donation, which is going to be the opportunity to commission a pet portrait from me. So I'm going to leave the link to the auction site below. Please do place your bid. We're trying to raise lots of money for families in Gaza, and that's through the organisation called Coffees for Gaza, and you can follow them on Instagram as well. And there's also loads of other amazing things involved in this auction, lots of artist made items, and I really appreciate all of your involvement in these things. And I'll see you again very soon, trying to keep up with more regular content, so leave me a like and a comment, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.